Thank you, Stephen, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to call this presentation Life After Moneyval, but as you are here today, Moneyval is here to stay. Before I cover Moneyval, other international issues, and our supervisory approach for 2015, I would like to introduce myself and explain the evolution of the Financial Crime Supervision and Policy Division. Now, before my appointment as director of this division at the beginning of this month, I was assistant and then deputy director in the fiduciary division for 9 years and was previously in the then investment business division for 5. Of my 15 years at the Commission as a supervisor, 13 of them have been spent assessing financial services businesses against the anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism requirements of the day. That started with the guidance notes, which some of us might know better as the Rainbow Book, and through the introduction at the end of 2007 of the Proceeds of Crime regulations and the Handbook rules, which established the enforceable AML CFT regime, which we all work with today. Now, the Financial Crime Supervision and Policy Division is now a fully fledged division with the same status as other supervisory and policy divisions in the Commission, headed up by a director. This is reflected in its name. Previously, it was called the AML unit. It was initially a service centre for the other supervisory divisions to use to farm out the on-sites and inquiries aspects of AML CFT supervision. In the early days, the relevant sectoral divisions issued the reports and oversaw any follow-up. Now, as a fully established division, we handle post-visit reporting, oversee remediation, and we can and do make direct referral to enforcement, although in practice we include the relevant sector division in this process. Now, the same checks and balances are applied to our financial crime risk assessments as that of the other divisions, whereby all material on-site findings and any proposed remediation is quality assured through an internal governance panel made up of senior staff from across the Commission. Like the other sectorial divisions, we too have responsibility to work on policy initiatives, and it is with this area that I will now start. I will begin with Moneyval, which has dominated our work for at least a year, but I'm going to roll it back to the start of Guernsey's involvement with Moneyval, because we are often asked by firms when on site, who is Moneyval, what is its role, and why did Guernsey join? Now, Moneyval is a committee of experts on the evaluation of measures to tackle money laundering and the financing of terrorism. It was formed by the Council of Europe, and it has the role of ensuring that its member states have effective AML CFT measures in place to comply with the international standards issued by the Financial Action Task Force, FATF. Moneyval consists of about 30 member states that are subject to its assessment. It also follows up on progress made by a jurisdiction on meeting recommendations made as a result of an evaluation through follow-up and discussions at plenaries. Guernsey, Jersey, and the Isle of Man, who were previously assessed by the International Monetary Fund, joined Moneyval for this very reason, because there was no means by which we could show those international bodies who scrutinise us how we had addressed recommendations that IMF had made. Many of Moneyval's members are from the newer, wider Europe and a little bit beyond. There are, however, a number of observer seats. These are held by Canada, Japan, Mexico, and the US, and by organisations which include the FATF, the IMF, UN bodies on drugs, crime and counter-terrorism, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and the World Bank. This means that there is a large and influential audience when an evaluation of a jurisdiction is under the spotlight. Now, the bailiwick joined in order to achieve international endorsement of our AML-CFT framework. Without such assurance, we'd be left out on our own. I hope that this has helped clarify why we joined and why these assessments are so important. Now, Moneyval assessment of a jurisdiction is based upon peer review utilising a self-assessment questionnaire and mutual evaluation by member states in a process strikingly familiar to the AML-CFT visits we put you through. In the case of Guernsey's evaluation, the Moneyval team visited the bailiwick between the 7th and 11th of October. The 8 evaluators had either legal, supervisory, or law enforcement pedigrees. Now, they did spend some time with the bailiwick authorities, including the Commission, but much of their visit focused on assessing the effectiveness of Guernsey's implementation of the FATF 2003 recommendations. And in order to assess this, they spent most of their time meeting, talking, and very often challenging firms on a range of topics, such as the financial crime risks they face, how they dealt with them, and supervision by the regulator. Now, given the spotlight currently on transparency of beneficial ownership of trusts and companies, I don't think it will be a surprise to anyone here that from the feedback we have had from some firms Moneyval met, the evaluators were extremely interested in exploring the depth and breadth of due diligence undertaken by firms to establish beneficial ownership. Because of the focus on effectiveness of the bailiwick's AML-CFT framework, a lot of firms participated in the evaluation. 23 firms and 2 professional organisations agreed to meet the assessors. Their preparation and participation in the evaluation is much appreciated, so thank you, and we mean that. Now, the bailiwick received feedback on the initial findings on the morning of the 11th, and the evaluators are now preparing their draft report for review and adoption at the Moneyval plenary in April 2015, after which it will be published. The bailiwick authorities, including the Commission, will have an opportunity to comment on the report whilst it is in draft form. Now, I'd like to, but unfortunately I can't, give you feedback yet on their findings, as at this stage they are preliminary and have not been published and remain confidential. Indeed, we are still in a period when actions taken by a jurisdiction can influence their findings. However, I will address feedback on the evaluation later on. Now, Moneyval's evaluation of Guernsey was against the FATF 2003 recommendations, as was the IMF's assessment in 2010. The next time Moneyval visit, the evaluation will assess how the bailiwick is implementing the FATF 2012 recommendations. Now, it's likely that we won't be visited before 2018, but with the focus on effectiveness of jurisdictions, regimes, this 4 to 5 year gap isn't long in which to adapt the bailiwick framework and show that it works. At this point, I would also like to clarify that the European Union's 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive does not apply to the bailiwick. That directive is Europe's means of applying the FATF 2012 recommendations to member states. Now, the 2012 recommendations introduce the development of a national risk assessment by jurisdictions. The emphasis is on national, so it's how a country or territory identifies and manages money laundering and terrorist financing risks. Now, I must stress this is not an assessment by the financial regulator, but we will be a participant in the process. As with a firm's business risk assessment being at the heart of its AML-CFT controls, so too is a national risk assessment, the starting point from which everything else should evolve. In FATF words, a risk assessment allows countries to identify, assess, and understand its money laundering and terrorist financing. Once these are properly understood, countries can apply AML-CFT measures that correspond to the level of risk. In other words, the risk-based approach, which is central to enabling countries to prioritise their resources and allocate them effectively. Now, both the World Bank and the IMF have developed models to assist countries with this, which rely heavily on the compilation and analysis of statistics. The Commission already collects data to assist it with its supervision. But I must warn you that it is likely that further information will be required from firms, and I hope that you will forbear with us on this. Now, as much as possible, the data we request will be streamlined with what you currently provide us, though this project will also dovetail in with work we want to do on establishing what sort of industry data can enhance our financial crime risk assessments, and how and when we collect it. As you've just heard from Tim on the online submissions project, the ability to submit data online will make such requests easier for both of us to manage. In order to bring our supervision into line with the 2012 recommendations, we have commenced a project to revise the handbooks. The initiative was announced at last year's seminar when we asked for participants. We were inundated with volunteers from whom we have enlisted the services of compliance officers from about 15 firms from across the industry. We are grateful for their support and valuable input. We are also using this opportunity to revamp the structure of the handbook to make it more user-friendly and future-proof. We hope that the finished product will make it easier to reference the particular section, that guidance on a subject will be in one easy-to-access place, that it will help the emerging fintech sector comply, and that changes or amendments to the handbook can be introduced with minimal changes to its structure. Now, we emphasise to firms that policies and procedures need to be drafted in such a way that all staff can readily understand them. It's only right that we apply the same logic to the revision of the handbook. There are also benefits to be had on working with Jersey to align both islands' requirements in areas where it appears feasible to do so. I can give you an example. Jersey has a list of countries and territories identified as presenting higher risks. There seem to be benefits to adopting something similar here, and we are presently considering if this could be a pan-Channel Islands list. However, I would not want you to construe my comments here that we are heading towards a common handbook, and would reiterate that we are seeking alignments where it is beneficial to do so. Such benefits could relate to reducing the cost to pan-Channel Island firms of having to tailor controls in each individual island operation, or it could be to reduce regulatory arbitrage between us. Now, work on the handbook was temporarily put on hold in the run-up to Moneyval, but it has now been restarted. We aim to issue a draft handbook in the summer, but well in advance of that, we'll be talking to various representative groups on its development and ways to headline that launch. Lastly, we are also revising our on-site questionnaire to meet the FATF recommendations, as well as to pick up on feedback which we've had from firms. I will now move to supervision, which I've labelled as communication and engagement, because I want to show you how much this has changed. The division's prime responsibility is to assess financial crime risk, which is undertaken for all firms, irrespective of their size or impact. As a result, we actively assess about 1,300 licensees. Our assessment of financial crime risk is undertaken through a number of means, including full scope and themed on-sites, desktop reviews, whereby we analyse returns we might seek, such as business risk assessments or policies and procedures, or data coming into the Commission from returns and surveys. For any firm, as soon as it is licensed, we undertake an assessment utilising the draft business risk assessment submitted in support of its licence or registration application. However, our resources are finite. There are 9 of us, and we therefore apply a risk-based approach to our supervision, concentrating our time on the higher risk sectors, much as you devote more time on your higher risk relationships. And we utilise various means to reach out to lower risk sectors to ensure that our analysis of the financial crime risks remains accurate. I would like to stress that whilst your key relationships with the Commission is maintained through the relevant sectorial division, we do communicate with each other. PRISM enables the other divisions to alert us to potential financial crime risks through issues you take to them. Through a process the Commission terms triage, we determine whether a matter you've notified us is going to be escalated or not. The system also enables us to assess whether a particular issue is systemic at firm or sector level. Now, other means which we reach out to firms could be through themed on-sites or thematic reviews. A thematic review might be over a sector, a subsector, or by topic, such as politically exposed person relationships, introduced relationships, recruitment and training, or outsourced activities. Themed work can help us ascertain the level of financial crime risk a sector or subsector poses, and it also provides a secondary benefit insofar as giving us greater insight of any operational issues a subsector or sector might face, and that helps us in the development of guidance we periodically issue. The division's themed work this year focused on accountants, lawyers and estate agents in the prescribed businesses sector, soon after supervisory responsibility for them transferred from fiduciary to financial crime. This themed work consisted of a survey and questionnaire, analysis of the results from that, and requests of additional information from a select number of firms for some further scrutiny and focused visits. Results from that were fed back to the sectors, as well as case by case to each firm. Now, we seek to engage widely with industry through outreach to convey certain messages. This has been through seminars, workshops, Dear CEO letters, publishing guidance, and frequently asked questions. We utilise not only findings from our on-sites and themed work for the topics, but also international developments to keep you abreast of emerging issues. Now, I cannot overemphasise how much we want you to take advantage of what we offer here. We want to see you at seminars, we want you to participate in workshops, and we want you to take note of what we say in guidance and Dear CEO letters. That is because, firstly, queries raised at these events help us to identify where further guidance might be required. Secondly, we follow up when we undertake our supervisory work, such as an on-site visit or periodic assessment of a licensee, the issues we talked about at seminars or wrote about in letters and guidance. Therefore, if we find a firm with deficiencies in areas we have spoken and written about, you really cannot expect us to show much sympathy. We undertake approximately 50 visits a year. We just don't have the resources to nurse and nurture firms who don't listen. What we talk about and publish really are clues of what we will be looking at when we are on site. Finally, the Commission's enforcement notices give very clear messages on what regulatory risks are run. The current notices set out what could happen if firms don't take full responsibility for any compliance activities they have outsourced, if they have failed to assess the effectiveness of their compliance arrangements, if they have failed to advise the Commission of significant breaches or material failings in their policies, procedures and controls, and if they have failed to identify and address any shortcomings in their controls. Those public statements also indicate where we might be focusing some of our themed work next year. Now, we publish speeches, guidance, feedback, frequently asked questions, Dear CEO letters and enforcement notices. This is all available on our website. Now, I'll talk through what could be a potential subject for themed work: suspicious activity reporting. We co-hosted a seminar with the FIU in which we set out our expectations relating to a firm's compliance arrangements on suspicious activity reporting. This is an area we already focus on during a full-scope visit, but we could pick this as an area for themed on-site or thematic review next year to see how effective that seminar was. However we determine to explore this area, we will be examining what triggers the report and what inquiries a money laundering reporting officer made in advance of making a disclosure, and how relationships are managed after you've raised a suspicion. This would include how you deal with the issue of declining or obtaining consent for requested acts and transactions. Clearly, at grassroots level, AML-CFT supervision focuses on compliance with the regulations and rules. But what we're actually looking at and considering in many areas are your judgments. That is because exercising sound judgment is a key requirement in the minimum licensing criteria across all the regulatory laws, which must be met on an ongoing basis. Now, the sorts of judgments we are interested in seeing being made responsibly and wisely range from a senior management decision to onboard a new high-risk client to an MLRO's decision to make a report or not. Now, this slide illustrates how much we have engaged with you through 2013 and 2014. Red represents last year, blue this year. We've held more workshops and seminars, issued more guidance, and in light of international events, put out more warnings, sanctions, and notices. We hear frequently from MLROs that these sanction notices tell them what they already know because they heard it through their own grapevine, Themis. We post the sanctions notices issued by the competent authority, the states, on our website because it's open to all, whereas Themis is the FIS system available only to MLROs. And we do know that our site gets a lot of hits as well. Now, the division met a lot of people this year. The seminar on suspicious activity reporting and tax evasion drew a total of more than 500 people into our offices. In addition, the division hosted 7 workshops with industry representatives, each attracting between 30 and 150 people. We believe this engagement is helpful to both of us, and going forward intend to hold workshops and seminars on relevant issues. Now I'll run through a few topics we have in mind. The division hosted successful sessions last year on the Moneyval evaluation of Cyprus. We think feedback on IMF and Moneyval evaluations are useful, and there are 2 obvious evaluations to share with you in this way next year. Obviously, the results from the Moneyval evaluation of Guernsey and of Jersey, who Moneyval are evaluating early next year. So 2015 is therefore looking as though it will have a very local theme. It is also likely that we'll see some of the first assessments against the FATF 2012 recommendations coming through. So feedback on that will be something to look forward to from us. Now, another obvious topic for an event will be on the handbook. We will want to engage with you on why revisions are being made, and to that end may adopt some of the engagement techniques deployed for the Revision of Laws project, such as a recent open house drop-in sessions. And we want to continue with events which highlight the threats to the bailiwick, such as a seminar we organised on tax evasion, which PwC kindly agreed to deliver. Now, there's an ulterior motive to all our outreach, and that lies in an FATF 2012 recommendation for regulators to establish guidelines and provide feedback which assists you in applying measures to combat money laundering and terrorist financing, and in particular in detecting and reporting suspicions. Clearly, we don't want to be the ones to mess up a Moneyval evaluation by not doing this. Obviously, the Moneyval evaluation was a driver in our increased level of engagement in the latter half of 2013 and this year. Clearly, it will only be this time next year when you can look back and say whether you think we continued to actively engage with you. I want to, and so I hope that over the forthcoming year, I get to meet and talk with as many of you as possible for the right reasons, namely continuing to assure effective supervision for good firms to do good business for the bailiwick. Now, we have several minutes to take questions. I'm joined on stage by Steve Chandler, our policy advisor, whose remit includes revising the handbook, and by Callum McVean, our assistant director, who runs our on-site programme. Thank you.